So today I want to talk about something which is usually quite controversial and which really triggers people, namely about forgiveness. Most of us have really big difficulties to forgive ourselves, but even bigger problems or bigger difficulties to forgive other people. So I will start like Hitchcock. Or Hitchcock's movies. Let's start from the earthquake and then the tension's gonna rise. You have to forgive. If you want to heal, if you want to develop, if you want to vibrate higher, if you want to rise, you have to forgive. There is no other way. And quite a few people will probably start arguing immediately that how can we forgive some very bad things? How can we forgive if somebody did a lot of harm? How can we forgive if somebody hurt us? Yeah, we need to learn to forgive. Forgive does not necessarily mean forget, because from everything that happens to us, everything, we need to learn. We need to find a lesson. As yeah, I think I mentioned it already in one of my movies, in one of my videos. When something happens to us, which we now find terrible, difficult, unpleasant, instead of asking, why is it happening to me? Why does this happen to me? Why has it happened to me? Ask, what is the lesson inside? What is the lesson I need to learn? Of course, sometimes there are really, really bad things, and I don't want to compare, some kind of abuse and so on to other situations. However, yeah, let's leave it for later. Yes, you always need to understand that it must have been a lesson or a test in your ascendment, in your ascension, in your development. So we need to learn to forgive, because forgiveness sets us free. And the act of forgiveness is not for the other person. It's not for the person who did harm to you. However, it may be. But generally and basically and principally, sorry, my tumble dryer is somewhere in the background. Probably you can hear it. Okay, I'm not sorry. It's just a tumble dryer. The point is that forgiveness is for you. It sets you free. It unblocks you. It unblocks your energy. For those of you who are a little bit more spiritual, I can tell you that everything sits in your Agnya chakra, or like people who are not so much into, they call it third eye chakra. If you do not forgive yourself and the others, you block this chakra. And those of you who meditate, who are interested in such topics a little bit more, know that we need to unblock all our chakras to ascend, to vibrate higher, to develop. But even if you are not spiritual, a little bit of psychology. If you keep resentment, if you keep some kind of anger, if you keep all those bad emotions inside of you, you block yourself. You block your healing process, no matter if it's spiritual or purely psychological. You cannot go on with your therapy, actually, in most cases. So I mean various kinds of psychotherapy. You cannot accept yourself. You cannot accept your life. You cannot accept your situation as long as you do not forgive. And I'm not going to okay, some people would say that in many cases it's victim shaming. Of course it's not, because as I said, there are a lot of things which are not explicable, explainable, which should not have happened. However, you need to forgive. And when it comes to forgiving ourselves, don't know if I know a single person who wouldn't from time to time, like reminisce and remember the things they did months or years ago, or even in their childhood, and still didn't feel like guilty that they did it. Uh, it depends on our age and on our experience, but even kids have moments like this. I remember that for many years I couldn't forgive myself as a kid that I sneezed during breakfast at the kindergarten. We were eating milk soup. Those of you who lived somewhere in the Eastern Bloc, like Eastern Germany, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and so on, you probably remember it from your kindergarten that we really ate various kinds of milk soup as kids. So I was eating that milk soup and I sneezed, and of course I I made a little bit of mess on my table where I was sitting with like three other kids. Of course, they just laughed, but not laughed me out. They just laughed. They found it funny. I cleaned it with some kind of paper towel, and that was fine. But trust me, for many years, I woke up in the middle of the night still remembering that I sneezed with this stupid milk soup in my mouth, and I really couldn't forgive myself because I found it a complete shame. So, from a perspective of an adult, that was nothing. But from a child's perspective, it was something which I couldn't forgive myself. Probably also because of house I grew up in, or actually it was like, okay, it was house. It was not home. Uh, yeah, I will come back to this story. But as a kid, I did not have home. Yeah, all my life I haven't had a real home. But that's another story. Rather sad. But because I was brought up like that everything needed to be perfect, and being a human was basically forbidden and was like looked down on. I couldn't forgive myself that I sneezed with the milk soup. And there are many other things that we cannot forgive ourselves. Everybody makes mistakes. We all do. Sometimes these mistakes are huge, sometimes they are not. But if something happened, probably it was meant to happen. And it was a lesson for us and for someone else who was also involved. I hope you didn't kill anyone, because here I may have problems to I mean killing someone on purpose. Okay, sometimes it happens that we have accidents, so I was just like triggered to think of it, because I might, okay, thanks heavens it has never happened to me, but I may expect that there are situations that you can cause an accident where someone really lost their lives. Like I know some train drivers or bus drivers who had those situations that somebody jumped or laid on the track. Actually, I know such stories from both sides, from the side of the family whose member took that decision, and I know also it from the perspective of a person who was involved on the other side and couldn't brake or stop the vehicle on time. Yeah. Terrible thing, ain't it? But still, it wasn't their fault. Of course, it was not their fault that someone else took such a devastating decision. And I can imagine that, even with an appropriate psychotherapy, such memories and such feelings will return. But still, the crucial thing is to understand it and to forgive. So I'm sorry, I didn't plan it actually. It was a very harsh example, but let's get back to real life when we when we disappoint our friends, or families, when we take or make wrong decisions regarding our finances, our companies, and so on. Yes, the consequences may be really harsh. It may be really difficult, but still, you need to analyze it, understand what kind of lesson that was, what kind of mistake that was, that you are not going to repeat in your future life. What kind of behaviors or what kind of reactions you should avoid, not to repeat, not to make such mistakes again in your future life. Analyze, learn a lesson, and forgive. And we also need to learn to forgive other people. And it's much more difficult because, yeah, we live in a world and in a society that really likes to judge other people. People are very fast to judge. They're extremely quick, especially with the development of social media, where people can comment everything without thinking about it. There are also a lot of very wounded and unhappy people who somehow feel better when they criticize others. Of course, I find it terrible. I do not approve, and I will talk about it. But generally speaking, we are as society, we are quickly to judge, and people are like, oh, it is so difficult, so I don't know, extremely disgusting. I'm never going to forgive that. And they say they are never going to forgive that somebody left them, that somebody broke up their friendship, that somebody did this or that. Of course, some things that happen are terrible. They are terrible. But still, with appropriate, it can be therapy. It can be a psychotherapy with a really good psychologist or psychotherapist or coach. Well, we need to work on such things and, progress in order to forgive. It can also be kind of spiritual guidance if you are more like into it. But as I said, forgiveness does not mean forgetting that it happened. Just releasing. Yeah, that's the word I was looking for. You need to release it. You need to release and forgive. If you forget, maybe you need to forget. But I would say mostly we shouldn't forget. We just need to learn. We just need to analyze it, take this lesson, and go further. For many years, I also couldn't. Okay. For most of my life, I could not forgive many things. And I had really big problems to forgive anyone. Okay, maybe not anyone. That's not right. When it comes to some easy, lightweight things, I could forgive them very quickly and easily. But some deep wounds and deep harm, especially from my childhood, which was caused by most members of my family, I couldn't forgive it. I kept on asking all my life, why me? Why me? Why did they do this to me? Why did they hate me so much? Why did they hurt me? Why did they say this? Why did they threaten me? Why did they, throw me out of house and so on? Why didn't my parents love me? Why did all kids have parents? Of course, it's not all kids, but I thought so. Why did or do all kids have parents who love them and me not? Why do I have a grandma who hates me? And why this, why that? And trust me, I went through a lot of, I wouldn't say that I went through a lot of therapies, but I met various psychologists and or psychotherapists, and basically nobody was able to help me, really. And, with years passing by, There were more and more situations because there was my, fortunately, ex-husband, who was really a psycho. I have to admit it. Who was a psycho, but now I also understand the lesson that was in it. Uh, Another partner who, you know, treated me like a crap and just and threw me also out of his life and house and family and so on in the worst moment of my life, one of the worst moments of my life, and so on and so forth. And yeah, people with whom I worked at some point, who hated me so much and were so jealous that they did everything so that I did not feel well at that workplace, that I didn't get what I was supposed to get. An appropriate, a proper contract. People who were doing and who did a lot of harm to me. I couldn't forgive it, and I was building up a stack of my problems, of my resentment, of my hatred, of my, oh my God, I cannot even name my feelings, but it was getting worse and worse. And at some point, fortunately, I understood that I need to forgive. I need to learn lessons from it, and I need to forgive, and I need to go further, because this pile of of those negative feelings was getting bigger and bigger and was getting heavier and heavier, and I was carrying that pile in my backpack, and my emotional backpack, was getting heavier and heavier. And at some point it was so heavy, it started like drowning me. It was bringing me down deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the abyss, and there was no way for me to get to the surface back and start living again and start breathing. I had only two options: either I release, learn to forgive, and swim back to the surface, or I drown. I stay on the seabed together with this whole bunch of stuff, and I suffocate. So I decided to cut the ropes of that backpack and to swim to the surface. And again, it was that book of my ex-colleague, about acceptance. It's also about acceptance of yourself, of your life, and so on. And there are quite a few chapters on forgiveness there, where Sonia also says it doesn't mean that the things that happened to you, that people did to you, were right. They were not right, but still you need to forgive, especially as you don't know the background, why some people behaved like they did. Yes, and I don't know if I should talk more about this story, or I should talk about the background. Maybe I will go to the background. People do various things to us, but you sometimes do not know. Okay, not sometimes. Wrong, Dottie, correct yourself. You almost never know why they behave like they do, because they also have their emotional backpack full of stories, full of problems, full of fears, full of sadness, desperation, and so on. And it also influences the way they function, the way they speak, the way they behave. And you never know what the other person feels, what their situation is, and so on and so forth, even if they are your parents. I needed almost 40 years to understand the behavior of my parents. Even though I had known most of those stories, I had never analyzed them, and I had never understood them. And when I started, analyzing what had happened to my parents, in what environment they grew up, how my grandparents behaved, what terrible things happened to them. No surprise that they were behaving like they were. And of course, I'm not saying that it was fine then to treat their child the way they did, but I'm gonna talk about it in another video on being. Actually, I wanted to have a video about being a mother, but maybe being a parent will be better title for it. Anyway, to cut the long story short, it's much better when you first heal your wounds and then become a parent. But in most cases, it does not happen like that. So people carry their emotional baggage, their emotional backpack, and then have kids, and then like project their fears, their pain, and so on onto those kids. It's not right, but it happens. So having analyzed a lot of things, why my parents behaved like that, why my grandma. Yeah, my grandma is not here any longer. And I had a very difficult relationship because I really wanted to love my grandma. And I really wanted to believe that she loved me, but she did a lot of harm. She did extremely lot of harm to me and also to other people like my father. So no way that my father was also a wounded person. And for many years I felt that resentment. I couldn't forgive. I spent most of my life somehow with my grandma, visiting her or going on holiday and so on. But I collected all those stones she threw at me, emotional, energetic stones. I collected more and more of them, and my anger, my resentment, my bad feelings grew at the same time. And my grandma, she behaved as if she had hated me, really. At the same time, she kept on telling me that she loved me, which I never believed as a kid or teenager or even an adult person. I understood that in her own way and deep in her heart, she really loved me, but I understood it like a few weeks or a few months ago, and my grandma died a few years ago, trust me. Because, when I analyzed her behavior, it was it was terrible. And very recently, I started analyzing what her life had looked like and how she was treated as a woman. Oh my God, it was a sign from my grandma. I have roses next to me, and one of them, dropped a few petals now, even though it's a frische rosa. It's a fresh rose. So thank you for confirmation. So anyway, when I thought how my grandma had been treated before as a woman, in her family, in the society, what she had gone through, I understood, first of all, how deep her wounds were, even though I heard those stories as a kid. And I also understood that probably in her crazy way, she was trying to protect me, or even when she was, because it's unfortunately true, she was dissatisfied that I was born a girl. And, she grew up and lived in times when women were not really respected. So she wanted kind of to spare such situations to her grandchildren. And therefore she was of the opinion it was better to be a man. And it wasn't her fault. It wasn't her fault. Of course, it's a pity that my grandma did not have a chance to heal in the meantime. And her life was really terrible. She was, she grew, when she was a kid, she was born in a very rich family, but it was a family with a lot of money and no love, no feelings for kids. with a mother who was like a witch, really. My great-grandma really hated my grandma and my aunt. And then things were getting worse and worse, because then the family, we had World War II, the family lost quite a lot of money, got much poorer. And then some people died. Then my grandma had to get married very, very quickly, and probably her first husband, it wasn't her dream man, it wasn't her Mr. Right. I hope my grandfather was. Then he died in an accident, and in those years she was left alone with a small kid, and so on. And many stories. Many years later, there was my grandfather. My father was born. She lost a few kids on the, a few pregnancies on the way. Then her first son, so my father's stepbrother or half brother, he also died in an accident, and so on and so forth. No surprise that she was quite bitter, and that she also wished her grandchildren other fate, and she wasn't really happy that I was born a girl. Anyway, it's the background. So as I said, you never know what people feel, what had happened to them, what kind of wounding they have, how mistreated they were, what kind of disappointments happened in their lives. And this is why then they act like they do. As I said, it's not fine, because we all should have this opportunity to heal using different ways, using appropriate psychotherapy, or some kind of coaching, or medical advice, some kind of spiritual coaching, and so on. But unfortunately, not really many people have that chance. So this is coming back to our main topic. This is why we really need to learn to forgive. Not forget, not say that it was right, because it was not right. Forgive for yourself, and maybe also for the other person, because they also may not feel fine with the things they did. Yes, quite a few of them are really aware of the fact that they did harm, and some of them are pretty quickly, they get pretty quickly aware of that fact. Some of them need more time, and maybe they do some therapies now, or they are in the process of, spiritual development, and then they start understanding it. And your forgiveness can also unblock their self-forgiveness. Anyway, yes, because it's gonna be long again. We are already at almost half an hour. So what I want to say, really, learn to forgive. It does not. Okay, I don't want to say that it does not cost you any energy, or it does not cost you anything. It does, but the price is much lower than holding on to that resentment and hatred and pain for the rest of your life. Because resentment, pain, hatred, they are like toxins. They are all toxins, they are all poison that you keep inside of your mind and inside of your body. And the more poison in your mind and body, the worse mental and physical state of your own being. So release it to feel a little bit lighter. And it will really help you if you forgive. Unblock your subtle system, unblock your chakras, unblock your way of thinking, and just forgive and go on. Learn from those people important lessons. It's another thing that now I remembered. It's also in Sonia's book. She says, be grateful for those lessons, because even if those people did not teach you something that you would like to, like learn and copy from them, even if they set this bad or wrong example, you learn at least from them how not to behave, what not to do. If you think that your parents hurt you and they did some harm because they didn't take care of you, they didn't provide you with enough attention, love, and so on, treat it as a lesson what not to do when you don't have your own child. Or if you do not plan any children, you're certainly gonna be an aunt or an uncle. So learn how not to treat, other kids or generally other people, your partner, your friends. If you can learn from someone what to do, it's great. But if you learn from them what not to do, it's also a valuable lesson. So learn what not to do. Learn your lessons. Forgive. Maybe you will also be able suddenly to understand those people. I'm not saying that you need to do it immediately, because I know how difficult and how hard it is. As I said, even though I did it for many, I've been doing it for many years, I got finally successful quite recently. But it was worth it. It was worth it, and I'm really grateful for this chance that I was able to understand and learn some lessons. So I think that was the main point. I had some other thoughts in my head, but I think it's long enough. So I'm sending you a lot of light and love. You see, there is still some light behind me from the sunset. So stay positive. Really try to stay positive. Even in the darkest hour, you know, the stars are only visible in darkness.